Okay, let's be real. There are a lot of people trying to promote their podcast on Instagram right now, but not a lot of people doing a very good job of it. I'm not trying to be shady, but just a lot of methods that I see on Instagram for trying to drive traffic to a podcast just aren't that effective. So in this video, I'm going to share with you my own strategy for content marketing for a podcast that is proven to be effective, so that you can not only increase your podcast listenership, but also grow a decent following on Instagram while you're at it. Sounds like a win-win, right? It is. But before we get into this, I'll be honest, I need some caffeine. As you can probably tell, I'm a little congested because I am currently recovering from... So let's go make an iced matcha before we get this started. By the way, this video is sponsored by Riverside FM. Riverside is the best way to record studio quality audio and video for your podcast from anywhere in the world. It's all in your web browser and it just takes a few clicks to set up and then send the link to your podcast guest. Riverside has a bunch of awesome features that make it the perfect podcast production tool. First of all, I love that Riverside always records separate tracks for each guest. So you have one audio track for you, one audio track for the guest, and the same with video. This is a game changer when it comes to editing because any podcast editor knows the struggle of having all of your people on one recording and then one person is way louder than the other, and it's very, very hard to fix that later. So that's why it's amazing that Riverside gives you those separate tracks so that you can customize each person's volume and everything else so it all sounds great together. Another cool feature that I think is really neat is that Riverside allows you to add markers while you are recording. So picture this, you're recording with a guest, they say something really interesting and you're like, that would make a perfect little quote for later or a perfect clip for social media later on. You can add a marker and then later on, Riverside is going to automatically take that marked area and turn it into a clip that you can post on your podcast Instagram, for example. Otherwise, you can always go back later and choose sections that you think would work well for social. And of course, when you go back and choose those clips, you can choose your aspect ratio, whether you want it for Instagram stories or reels, for a feed post, or a widescreen version. You can do all of that within Riverside. So check out Riverside FM for yourself at the link in the description below. I know you're gonna love it, and it is gonna make your podcast production workflow a total dream, just like this beautiful matcha latte. Have you ever seen those cute photos of like the little birds riding along on rhinos and you're like, oh, that's so cute. One's really big, one's really small, but they're buddies. Well, that's exactly what your podcast and your Instagram account can be like. Basically, they're in a symbiotic relationship. Your podcast can help your Instagram grow, and your Instagram can also help your podcast grow, but in different ways. The reason why these two work so well together is because they both kind of hit on different types of discoverability in terms of like how your audience can find you online. On one hand, podcasts are really great at SEO, meaning people can find you by searching for the type of stuff that you're talking about. So if you have like a home renovation podcast, or if you have a mental health podcast, or if you have like a career advice podcast, people will find you by searching for keywords related to your niche. They'll listen to an episode answering a question that they are asking and then hopefully find it really valuable and hit subscribe and keep on listening. And then eventually, if they become a big fan, they might just head on over to your Instagram and follow you there too. Meanwhile, discoverability works a little bit different on Instagram. People don't really go on Instagram to search for things, but people are scrolling through the Reels feed, which is a feed of content that's organized based on interest rather than who you're already following. So as I'm scrolling through my Reels feed, I'm seeing stuff from people that I don't follow yet, but the algorithm has determined that I might be interested in it. So I might be able to find something new that I'm interested in through Reels, for example, without having to search for it. So with podcasts, we have the SEO side of discoverability covered, and with Instagram, we have the kind of recommendations algorithm side of discoverability covered. And the other benefit of Instagram is that you have that timely sort of daily check-in with your audience to remain top of mind for them. And it's also just an easier place to build a community because people can comment and respond to each other, whereas with a podcast, it's very much a one-way kind of line of communication. So that's why your podcast and your Instagram are such perfect buddies when it comes to growing an audience online. But here's where it really ties in to be the perfect match. Your podcast is going to be the perfect source of inspiration and content for your Instagram. Podcasts, by their nature, are longer format, high value pieces of content. Let's say you do an interview for an hour long, or even if you just do like a 25-minute solo episode, there is just a lot of words and a lot of content and value contained in that amount of time. And you can draw so much inspiration from that chunk of content and turn it into something valuable for Instagram too, without having to start from a totally blank page and like dream up new Instagram content. You can grab it from that podcast episode. So this is exactly where my secret sauce, my effective growth strategy for a podcast promo Instagram comes from. But first, before I can tell you exactly what you should do, we kind of need to quickly go over what you shouldn't be doing and rewind a little bit to before when I was saying how a lot of people aren't really doing this right, in my opinion. So let's talk about what that looks like. So this is the biggest mistake that a lot of podcast promo accounts on Instagram are making. And that is that they are promoting their podcast with every single post. Now, I know that might sound funny because you're like, well, Katie, isn't the whole point of this Instagram account to promote my podcast? Well, yes, but in our current age of everyone being so oversaturated by advertisements everywhere they look, we need to find more ways of subtly marketing our content to the people who are actually going to be interested in it. And instead of just kind of bombarding them with essentially flyers saying, come listen to my podcast, come listen to my podcast, we need to instead provide them value where they're at. So if they're on Instagram, figuring out how we can provide them content in a format that they are kind of used to seeing on Instagram. Growing a community on Instagram is essentially all about assembling a group of people with a common interest and providing value for them through your content, either by providing them encouragement, entertainment, or education. And that's what you need to do with a podcast Instagram as well. Too many podcasters that I see on Instagram are just post after post saying like, new episodes live, go check it out. New episode live, go check it out. And while I definitely think there's a time and place for just explicitly no shame self-promo, marketing yourself on Instagram, I think that you're not going to find great success with that being your entire strategy. Because why do I want to follow an account that is like literally just ad after ad after ad? I want to follow an account that provides me either encouragement, education, or entertainment, like I was saying. With the goal being that you form this engaged community and you show up and you provide them value where they're at, which in this case is on Instagram, and stay top of mind for them. So when the day comes that they're like, oh, you know what, I actually would really like to know more about this topic. Or, I'm looking for a podcast that I can listen to while I go on a walk, then they'll think of yours. And I think it's good to periodically remind people oh, go check out the link in my bio for the latest episode. That's fine. But I think your content can't be just that. Because if it's only that, then there's not really any reason to follow you. Remember that at the end of the day, when people are scrolling on Instagram, it's because they want to be scrolling on Instagram, and it is very, very difficult to pry them away from the app that they have kind of chosen to be on, whether that's Instagram or TikTok or whatever they've opened up. So if you want to try to direct traffic away from Instagram, just know off the bat that's going to be challenging. But if you want to do it, you're going to have to do it in a creative way that really provides value and gains you that engagement and attention on Instagram itself, so that when people are ready, they'll migrate over to your other platform. But you can't just drive traffic off of Instagram without first creating that value and generating that engagement and that loyal audience. Okay, now that we've covered what not to do, time for you to steal my strategy. I'm going to talk about what I think is the most effective content strategy for growing a podcast-focused Instagram account. Really, I can boil down my philosophy to this one simple sentiment. It's all about repurposing creatively. Like I was saying before, there is so much value in any given podcast episode. They're long, there's a lot of good stuff in there, there's so much you can take from it. So really what you need to do is just take that episode and turn it into types of content that perform well on Instagram and that your audience is going to want to engage with. So I just really want to emphasize here that this strategy that I find to be very effective is really actually not that much more effort than those strategies that I was kind of talking about in part 2 that don't work so well, because essentially they're both just taking clips or like sections from the main podcast, but I think it's about what you do with those clips and how you kind of repurpose them creatively that really makes the difference. So rather than just grabbing a interesting quote or interesting part of the conversation and then kind of turning it into your standard clip and then saying like, go check out the episode, that's sort of the traditional way. Instead, we're going to take sections from the episode and we're going to turn them into popular Instagram formats that sort of make them feel like this content was expressly made for Instagram, even though it wasn't, even though it is repurposed, but it's going to feel like it was made, organically for Instagram. So let's just take a little peek at the strategy that I've drawn up for my podcast Instagram account. It's at Creator Club Podcast if you want to follow it. I'll be honest, it's been neglected for years. I started it when I started the podcast and then I just kind of let it die off for a little while, but recently I was feeling inspired to reinvigorate it. So this is the strategy that I developed and that Shelby from my team is now executing over on that account. So this is pretty much what it looks like. On Mondays, we post a reel that is a quote section from the episode. On Tuesdays, we post a graphic carousel, which is kind of a summary of some of the main points of the episode. Wednesdays, we post a meme that kind of taps into a relatable problem or like kind of funny moment from the episode. On Thursdays, we post another reel quote, or alternatively, we might post a reel that is kind of like a trend or some sort of like format that's going around that's viral that is a take on that trend that sort of draws on themes from the episode. And then finally on Friday, we post a tweet graphic. So you can see with this strategy, we're really tapping into some of the most successful types of content on Instagram, those being graphic carousels, memes, tweet graphics, and of course, reels. I think this is a really effective approach because like I was saying, the content feels organic to Instagram and it kind of reminds our audience of the new episode because we're tapping into similar themes with each post without having to scream like, go check out our episode. It's a lot more subtle and it's a lot more, engaging and valuable without it, just feeling like an ad basically. We're still experimenting with the reels. And like I was saying, I do want to kind of throw in one that feels a little bit more like a trend or, some kind of like viral reels format. So we're still going to play around with that. But what we're doing so far with the reels quote thing, which has been working well, and this is great, especially if you also record solo episodes like me. When we were first talking about doing a quote from the episode, I was like, I guess I'll just set up my phone and record myself vertically the entire time I'm recording the episode. But then I was like, no, that is going to add so much extra work for Shelby to have to go through and like scan the recording to try to find the right quote and like cut it out. Instead, since our episodes are scripted, we just choose a section of the script ahead of time and say like, this is going to be our Reels quote. And then I literally just film me saying that quote. So I'll like set up, record the whole episode, leave my headphones and my microphone all set up, and then I'll just get out my phone. And here's my secret. I won't actually be recording on my microphone when I do this, but I just record myself on my phone saying the quote from the script that we had picked out as like a good moment to highlight. And then it makes it so much faster because then when Shelby goes to create the reel, she's already got that clip like picked out for her. So it's so efficient to do it that way. Now I know it doesn't always work, obviously, if you have a guest and you're doing an interview, because then it's entirely off the cuff, but then that's where, Riverside's features of like adding a marker or like going back and selecting clips can work really well for you too. So hopefully you can see from this strategy that it really is all just about getting creative and thinking about how can I take the themes, the topics, the ideas from this podcast episode and then turn it into a piece of content that feels like it was specifically made for Instagram. Because I can promise you it's going to perform so much better if it feels like you went out of your way to design it specifically for Instagram. If it feels like you just grabbed it from somewhere else, or it's just like something that feels repurposed, then it's not going to perform as well because people kind of feel that level of low effort and it doesn't feel as engaging as it would otherwise. So really try to get creative with how can you make this feel like it was meant to be on Instagram. And that's the key to an effective podcast promotion strategy. So if you're still early in your podcast journey and you're looking for help from anything from editing to creating a growth strategy to publishing your podcast via your RSS feed, then girl, I got you covered. I've got a whole series going in depth on how you can get your podcast off the ground as a total beginner. So you can start out watching that whole series with this video right here. I promise we're going to go through everything so you will feel confident about getting your podcast started by the end of this 4-part series. So go ahead and watch that. As always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having adventures and following your dreams, and I will see you over in this video. Okay, bye.